Awesome. Well, it is a real joy for Judy and I to actually be here. Mel has been such a great friend to us for a long time now. In fact, we came to the first QFS, but we've known Mel even way before then. In fact, Mel actually gave me my first real break in this space when I only had about 1,000 subscribers. Now we're up to about 50,000, so it's quite amazing. Our story, just very briefly, Judy and I, we both worked for the tax department in Canada. I had a senior federal officer position for about 24 years. And it was during COVID that we fell into this space by sheer happenstance because we were trying to get gold, but there was no gold to be got, and we wound up in this space. Well, within 13 months, it revolutionized our lives. And I want to share with you some principles that really helped Judy and I to navigate this space and really caused a great deal of success for us. And there's 5 of them. Now, I call these things the 5 Ps. Now, there used to be only 4, but really all the way through, the 5th one is the biggest in my estimation. Now, the first one, the first principle, and these are principles that we employ that really made a massive, massive difference on the level of success that we achieved, or we experienced. How about I'll say it that way? And the first one is purpose. So for Judy and I, the accumulation of wealth for the sake of accumulating it is pointless. It's utterly pointless. Jesus one time said, what should it profit a man if he gained the whole wide world but lost his own soul? And so for us, we had to know what our purpose is. Now, a lot of people say, hey, I want to have that wealth, but that isn't really their purpose. That is their what, it is not their why. And a lot of times people say, well, hey, I want that wealth so that I can have financial freedom, okay? Why do you want financial? Well, I want to be out of debt. Well, why do you want to be out of debt? So I can spend time with my family. I can not be a slave. You see, that's a why. And a lot of people really don't understand their why. They think they do, but they haven't even taken the time to write those goals down, to actually put those on paper. Now, is it important for us to visualize goals? Well, it is. Even the scripture says, without a vision, the people perish, right? What about thinking about them, talking about them? Yeah, life and death, we believe in the power of the tongue. But when a person actually puts their goals down, and I mean gets them into the absolute detail of what they are, like the minute detail. Let's say one of your goals is, hey, I would love to buy a property, I'd like a home over there. And you start thinking about what kind of home, hey, how many rooms, how many bedrooms, all that kind of stuff. You start to see it, you start to visualize it, you start to really become intimately connected with that. So much so that should you see the opportunity to achieve it, you're more than likely going to take it. Most people do not achieve their goals in life, not because those goals were unattainable, but because they lose the resolve to do it. You need to actually see it. You have to really visualize that goal. So the first thing I would say is get to know your why. Really get to know your why. Now, the second P is promise. And when I talk about promise, I don't mean when someone makes a promise to somebody else, but I'm talking about like, oh, well, that young person over there, they hold a lot of promise, or this investment holds a lot of promise. Now, promise, the way I equate promise, is really associated with hope. Now, Judy and I would call ourselves faith-based investors. Now, the biblical definition of faith is the evidence of things not seen, but things hoped for. Well, I'll tell you what, anybody making an investment is hoping for something they have not yet seen. That is a fact, Jack. And so you really want to infuse yourself with that real hope and belief of what it is, because in this space, as we know, we are constantly, having to deal with all the fear, the uncertainty, and the doubt. I mean, how much FUD is thrown around into this crypto digital asset space? Quite a lot of it, isn't it? And that is there specifically to manipulate our behavior over time. And it is attacking what? It's attacking your hope as an investor. And it is so vitally important that you start to speak into your own self that essence of what hope really is. You quintessentially have to have it. Because if you don't, if I can talk you into it, then someone else can certainly talk you out of it. You need to make sure that this is cemented deep down. Now, I'm running through these things fast, because they told me I have like 10 minutes, maybe 15 tops, right? And I can talk for a long, long time if you let me. So now, so that is a big, big one. So hope. Now, The next one after that I would say is so vitally important is perspective. And why is perspective so important? Well, perspective takes you from the short-term little things into the long-term actualization of what it is. This space that we're in right now is so nascent. Now, I know a lot of us feel like, well, it's been around for 13 years since Bitcoin came out. And oh, that's such a long time. But in truth, it is really actually quite new. We are literally at the infancy level of what this is. I try to, sometimes I give this example. When I was about 14 years old, my dad gave me a Timex Sinclair computer. So, you know, Timex Sinclair, Timex the watch company. And this thing had 8K of RAM. Now, at the time, I remember folks were just, you know, a home computer was just a toy. It was a novelty. It was something you kind of played around with, maybe a few little dots bouncing across the screen and all that kind of stuff. And how many of us in this room lived during that time? Do you know a small, tiny, itsy-bitsy little investment in a little-known company called Microsoft at that time would have revolutionized your life? Generationally. How about when the internet came out? Now, my wife and I, we were having kids during that time, and I remember back at the internet, because, you know, working with the government, stuff like that, and things that we did, still did a whole lot of things by hand. And, you know, the internet was really, the killer app for the internet was email. And a lot of people really didn't understand it. They did not have the vision that we have today. They did not see the fact that in our hand we would hold devices. Now, how many remember this, watching the Jetsons when you were a kid? And, you know, now we have FaceTime. Well, that was sheer and utter science fiction. Nobody really thought that. So very, very few people had the foresight, the perspective to see the potential application of what the internet was going to be. This distributed ledger technology space is going to swallow the internet whole. It is literally going to engulf it in such a way that most people, even right now, cannot truly envision the invention and the innovation that's coming. But it is going to be so massive that you won't even recognize the way the world is right now, even maybe 5 years from now. That's how fundamentally it's going to change. One of the things that I did in the Canadian government is I interpreted legislation for the Crown. Now that's, you know, the head of the government up there. And one of the acts that we enforced was the Bank Act. Well, in the Bank Act, there is a sunset clause. And it's June 30th of 2025, or at least that it was. They might have pushed that back one more year. But needless to say, that sunset clause basically says that no domestic nor foreign bank will even operate within Canada. And what's interesting is, what happens on July 1st? Well, on July 1st, all the Basel III requirements that all of these central banks around the wide world agreed would be in full force. If you want to participate in this new global economy, you will have to comply with these, you know, these basic rules. And another thing that's thrown out there all the time is the ISO 222 messaging standard. And if you want to be participating as a financial institution in, you know, the wide world, you're going to have to comply with that. Well, interestingly enough, there's only two digital assets, at least the framework, not the asset itself, but the protocol, the framework that it runs on, that are compliant with this standard. One is XRP and the other is XLM, so Ripple and Stellar. That is a fact. You can investigate that. You see a company like Ripple having perspective. You want to see a company like Ripple that is, you know, seated with the IMF, the BIS, and all this kind of stuff. So having that long-term perspective is so vitally important in your investment journey. Now, the fourth one is perseverance. And perseverance is one of those things. We live in such a disposable society. You know, we buy things to throw away. Most people have truly lost what it feels like for perseverance. I mean, I'm running a channel, I see the comments there. And, you know, people are complaining at the price of XRP at, what, $2.30-some? Hey, it was just a few months ago, it was only like 40, 50 cents. How many hundreds of percent gain is that? That is obscene. Do you know you would never see that in a lifetime in a traditional market? It is unreal. And yet, folks have such a small level of patience. You have to be willing to persevere. Now, this is, the fifth one is this. I'll throw this out of this, I'll end with this. The fifth principle that my wife and I employ is prayer. Why? Because for Judy and I, I'll tell you what, we believe that when the scripture says many are the plans of a man's heart, it's the Lord's purpose that prevails. God has led and guided our steps into this position. You know, one of the things I contemplate a lot is when Jesus said, if you being evil, remember when he said this? If you being evil know how to give a good gift. Now, why didn't he just say if you being human? Because that's our excuse. Hey, we're human. No, he was highlighting a spiritual condition. He said, if you being evil know how to give a good gift, then how much more would your Father in heaven, who's loving, kind, merciful, good, gracious, compassionate, giving, and forgiving, give good gifts to those who ask him. And the Bible literally says, if we lack wisdom, let us ask of God, and he will abundantly supply. So we bathed our situation in prayer. And you know what? We were savers. We were not investors. We had a registered retirement savings plan, a tax-free savings account. We knew diddly squat about how to be successful as investors. And we certainly made our mistakes, but utilizing principles like what I just presented with you right here, these 5 principles, that governed our journey. It helped us to navigate the waters of this space, and it literally, in those 13 months, it revolutionized our lives. And there's people in this room that you've actually sat with me, and you've done coaching with me, and we've talked about this in a great level of detail of what happened in our situation. I wanted so much for you. You can't even know how much I want all of you to be across that finish line with us. So much. And I would just say, be strategic. Be strategic.